Hey there, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Afterthoughts. Tim Risto here. Hope you're having a great day. Just wanted to go ahead and punch in on this article that I was reading earlier today. It's really more of a survey, results of a survey, but I thought it was kind of interesting. It ties into this whole discussion we've been having again about faith-based films and Christian films, of course, in particular. So the headline here reads, a survey, majority of Christians believe Christian films can be used for evangelism. Now, at first glance, you may hear that and go, yeah, so what's the big deal? That's not an earth-shattering claim of any kind. But what I want you to really kind of hone in here on this particular article is the word majority. The majority of Christians surveyed believe Christian films can be used for evangelism. That's kind of the key, because that was not always the case, although Christian films have often been used as an evangelistic tool. They weren't always as accepted by the majority of Christians. So let's take a look at this real quick. This is over on BeliefNet.com, which is kind of a catch-all inspirational site. It's not necessarily just Christian, but this article caught my eye, so I thought we'd take a look at this. This is by Cecilia Buchanan, and it says, a new survey from LifeWay Research found that the majority of Christians believe that Christian films can be a useful tool for evangelism. The report surveyed 1,008 American Protestant churchgoers from September 19th to 29th, 2023. The survey found that 68% of respondents had watched a faith-based film in the last year, while 48% had watched a secular film. 72% stated they either somewhat or strongly agree that they intentionally seek out films with Christian messages. Let's read that again, because I think that's an important line, an important stat. 72% stated they either somewhat or strongly agree that they intentionally seek out films with Christian messages. Again, that hasn't always been the case, certainly not that strong. 81% also somewhat or strongly agreed with the statement that Christian films can be an effective tool for evangelism. Interesting, pretty high percentages. Now, of course, this is a survey of American Protestant churchgoers, so it's Christians, Protestants. So, you'd expect the number to be strong, but I think these are stronger numbers than I even would have anticipated. The study also broke down for differences in age, gender, and race. Interestingly, younger adults, age 18 to 34, were the least likely group to have seen a secular movie, 31%, and the most likely group to have invited a non-Christian friend to see a Christian film, 26%. I think that's encouraging and actually really interesting. I also did not anticipate quite those numbers on that particular category. They were also the group most likely to discuss religious themes in a secular film with a non-Christian, 31%. Here's what's really interesting to me, this particular point here. Non-denominational Christians, 77%, were the most likely group to have watched a Christian film, while Presbyterian Reformed were the least likely group, 49%. I find that very fascinating, and I don't want to get stereotypical in any way here, but what that statistic in particular suggests to me is at least the potential of, in these non-denominational churches, there being a greater openness to more quote-unquote modern films. Been around for a while, of course, but Christians utilizing film as an evangelistic tool, not so much since, probably more so since like the 70s or so. So it's a little more recent in terms of modern history, but more of an openness to modern evangelistic tools, more, audio, visual, social media type of tools. Now here we're just talking about film, of course, but again, that kind of suggests to me more of an openness to such tools like film for evangelism, for reaching out, for ministering. I know it's hard to glean too much specific from that, but while Presbyterian Reformed were the least likely group, 49%, it does obviously suggest, I think, a more openness to that. And if you look at, non-denominational churches versus Presbyterian Reformed and others in other categories as well, there's a lot more growth right now, even in non-denominational churches than some of the other denominations in particular. So does that equate directly with film? I'm not suggesting that, but I am saying that this openness to other tools for evangelistic and ministering purposes may possibly fit into that. And they talk about Christian books here. Let's go down to this paragraph. LifeWay Research CEO Scott McConnell stated the research shows the marketability of Christian films. It can be easy for Christian resource providers to design resources they hope are helpful, but Christian movies are something churchgoers want to see. I'll repeat that quote again because I think this is important. It can be easy for Christian resource providers to design resources they hope are helpful, but Christian movies are something churchgoers want to see. And I think that's what these statistics really kind of bear out. Now, that wasn't always the case, and that's why I think that's what's interesting about this statistic and this survey and this article. If you go back even to the 70s, kind of the beginning of evangelistic Christian films really hitting the mainstream, they were known for, Christian films then, were known for being very evangelistic, and that was really their goal. But even back then, they weren't widely accepted by Christians. Many were, certainly, and saw it as an opportunity, but a lot were not. And the films weren't always things that were necessarily had a good reputation in terms of the film-going audience. It wasn't something you'd take everybody to go see. They were schmaltzy. They weren't, they wore their heart on their sleeve in terms of the evangelistic message, kind of too preachy at times. So they turned off a regular film-going audience who oftentimes, were the target audience for the film, or at least intended target audience. So as more and more of that happened and Christian films got that kind of reputation, people tuned them out and they kind of became stereotyped as films that most people really wouldn't want to see, just very preachy. So I think even Christians didn't necessarily always want to go see those types of films. So they got this reputation and were not as accepted even by the church because they just weren't really organic in many ways in their storytelling. Really, we've been talking about The Forge, the Kendrick brothers' latest film that's in theaters right now, and they've done a lot, among others, to help change the perception of Christian films, even though their films have often been called, and rightly so, especially the early ones, very preachy. Some of their more recent films have done a great deal to change that while still remaining very evangelistic, and The Forge is a great example of this. I talked about this in my review. Have also done a lot of work to kind of change that by leaning into more organic storytelling and characters while still remaining very evangelistic. I think a lot of that, a lot of films, even films like Sound of Freedom, which again was not really a Christian film per se, it's a faith-based film with a lot of Christian themes and influences in it, but it's not about being evangelistic. But even films like that, this year's Sound of Hope, The Forge now, and others, War Room, Overcomers, a lot of Christian films have, in recent years, have been very proactive in kind of changing that image, I think. So this is encouraging to see because these statistics now, at least among Christians, seem to reflect that. This next line I think is really key too. They don't assume every Christian movie is a fit for non-Christians they know, but they agree films can be an effective way to share the gospel. Again, that's the narrative I think that's changed, and that's key. That's what we want, is films that can be an effective way to share the gospel. Effective way, not every non-Christian that is going to want to necessarily go to see like The Forge, but a lot will. because it's an effective story. It's an effective film that's told, that tells its story in an effective way. Continue on here. He also discussed including secular films in the survey. Our intention in asking churchgoers if they watch secular movies was to contrast viewership of movies that are not overtly Christian themed, and added, it's clear some churchgoers may not have been familiar with this use of the term secular, and others may have thought it was seeking to contrast movies that are overtly anti-Christian. It's just an understanding of the word secular, which probably is not as well used anymore, or not as commonly used as it used to be in even Christian circles. So a lot of people today just don't have a great reference for that term. So I think just in doing the survey, some people didn't understand that. Christian Site Movie Guide discussed the rise of Christian films last year. And by last year, I think they're referring to 2022 because the survey was done in 2023. This article actually doesn't have a date on it, so I'm not really sure when it was, but I'm assuming this was done probably sometime shortly after that September 2023 survey. So they're referring to films from 2022. But the Christian Movie Guide discussed the rise of Christian films last year, noting a Barna study that found the audience for Christian films had grown in recent years. The site has also found, through its report to the entertainment industry, that faith-based and family-friendly films tend to be more profitable than films featuring more language and adult themes. That's so true. You look at even Kendrick Brothers' film The War Room, which I think was made on a budget of about $3 million, if I remember correctly. It went on to make $76 million at the box office. So even cutting that in half, if that was their deal with theaters, which typically it's a 50-50 take, then even cutting that in half and subtracting the $3 million budget from that, they still went on to make a really good profit. And they typically invest, as I understand it, Kendrick Brothers do, that money into the next film they're going to make. So they're able to make a bigger, better film next time based on the profits they made from that film. Okay, continue on here. David Helling, who made his directorial debut with His Only Son, it's a film I'm not familiar with, discussed the appeal of Christian films to Hollywood. I think Hollywood is taking notice because at the end of the day, they see, okay, well, if there is revenue to be made through this type of entertainment, they might then now put more resources behind it. And because of that, we will start to see more and more of this content come out for a season. His Only Son made $13 million worldwide on a budget of $250,000. There again, Hollywood doesn't seem to have learned this lesson, because you look at a lot of the films, especially here in 2024, a lot of films that have gone and just failed miserably because their budgets are in the 250,000, 300, or I'm sorry, 250 million, 300 million, 400 million. They're in these incredibly massive budgets. They're just these bloated budget films that struggle to even make back the budget, anywhere close to the budget, because you've got that production budget, but you've also got marketing budget on top of that. And then, of course, whatever profit they make, they got to split 50-50 with theaters. It's just incredibly difficult to make back your budget and your marketing on some of these incredibly huge budgets. And again, so many of these films are very agenda-driven messaging films. Disney's done that a lot lately. Those are not popular with audiences. And so, it's going to be even a harder stretch to make back. Where Christian films, a number of these are working with much lower budgets. And to their credit, they're able to earn back above and beyond that, and also have to be more creative with the films themselves, I think, personally. Continuing on here, Helling, however, stated his own goal in making the film went much further than the monetary gains. My heart is to do biblical films for as long as the Lord allows me to do it, in order to bring Scripture's truth from the page to the screen, so that others can see these accounts as real people and be drawn to the Word into the gospel for themselves. So true. I've been talking a lot lately about numbers and the financials here on Creative Christians, and that's mainly because that's a reality. And it's something, again, that's a change from the past, where Christian filmmakers have struggled to be able to, earn enough money to make additional films. So the profit thing, and why I bring it up here so much, is important in the sense that if we can be making profitable films, we can go on and make more films, right? And that's been, I think, the Kendrick brothers' philosophy: keep the budget small, work to make films that will reach and target certain audiences about certain messages in terms of, discipleship for Christians, stories that appeal to as wide of a Christian audience as possible, and then, make good money on them so you can turn around and make more films. That's the idea. That's business, right? So you have to take that into account, while at the same time looking at what your film is saying in its story and characters and in its biblical messaging, certainly. And in some upcoming videos, we'll look a little more closely at the messaging in these films and not just the finances. Right now, since we've had a number of films, Christian films, in theaters here over this summer, I've been trying to take a look at the financing, the budgets behind it, because, again, that's an important factor. But pretty soon here, we're going to turn the narrative on to looking at the messaging and the biblical message in these films as well. Anyway, just thought this was an interesting article to share with you today. Again, on the surface, the headline may seem kind of like, yeah, well, obviously, Christian, films can be used for evangelism. But again, among Christians, believing that they can be used that way, that's something that's changed over time now. And I think, again, that's another sign that Christian filmmaking, Christian films, are coming more into their own now, going to be more accepted, potentially, at least among Christians right now, as a valid evangelism tool. So anyway, just want to look at this article. Thought it was kind of intriguing. What do you think? Are you accepting of Christian films as an evangelistic tool? And what maybe are some of the best Christian films you've seen that you think are good for Christians to use in that manner as a tool to reach others with the gospel? I just think it's interesting, kind of something that's grown. Christian films have gotten better, I think. And you could make an argument there's still a ways to go with some of them, but certainly we're making strides. And filmmakers like the Kendrick brothers have made some huge strides, both in terms of the quality of their films and certainly the quality of the evangelistic message as well, the biblical messaging that they're employing and making good, valid use of. So anyway, that's all I got for today. Please, if you like content like mine, subscribe to my channel, like this video, share it with someone you love, and be sure and check back here often. Hit that bell notification button. Make sure you get informed of anytime a new video here drops. Again, hope you're having a great day. Enjoy the rest of it. God bless, and above all else, don't forget to stay in God's Word. Blessings, y'all. See you next time. Bye-bye.